Today I'm talking about green finance, and this is mostly going to be about green bonds and related things. And for that, what I want to do is there's a great video on YouTube that talks about the first green bond that was created. So I want to put you the video about the first green bond by the people who did it. This is the first green bond ever. And we're not lucky enough to see the first bond issued in the 1770 by the paper. We don't know that. So we don't have that historical record, but for this we do. So I want to put this video for you, and then we will start with...
Climate change poses the greatest threat to humanity.
The effects of climate change can set back decades of progress in the developing world.
Just the scale of the issue is unsettling.
Environmental shocks will become more extreme and more frequent.
No single government or institution can solve this problem alone.
We are the last generation that can alter the course of climate change, and we require investment on a scale we have never seen before.
At that time, to make a sustainable portfolio was to exclude companies, not to invest in green projects. And that strategy, we didn't believe in that strategy. We wanted to have inclusion of good companies and also investment in green projects.
There were growing discussion about climate change and global warming and things like that, but it was very difficult for us really to find something to invest in that had to do with that. At that time we had mostly Swedish government bonds and mortgage bonds, and we were looking for other alternatives also.
The supply of interesting investment opportunities in the sustainable area was very limited. So we were looking for something more liquid, something easy to understand, something credible.
Coming into 2006-2007, we had a situation where, one, a lot of people were talking about global warming. We also had a situation where governments didn't need to borrow money. So the combination of investors being willing to contribute to a better society, together with the lack of government supply, basically made me sit down and draft an idea about what could be done to engage institutional investors in, at that time, global warming. I went out to a number of investors first, and those investors saw it was a great idea. And with certainty that I had their support, I then went to the World Bank and said, this is something we have checked with clients, they're interested.
What happened was a combination of us coming up with our environmental strategy, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change with very strong warning that we have to change the way we live, and Mother Nature, through catastrophic disasters, telling us it is time to act. That mobilized the bank to provide to the investor community a product they can use to vote green.
So we were approached by Scandinavian investors who came to us through their bank, SEB. They were looking for products in all asset classes that somehow addressed the challenges of climate change. And they had products in many of the other asset classes, but not for fixed income. SEB knew that the World Bank finances climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation projects, but we finance that through fixed income products. So for the Scandinavian investors, it was perfect because they were looking for a product that supported these types of projects, but that didn't have project risk or specific country risk, and that had the same financial characteristics as other products they were familiar with.
We had a very constructive dialogue, and I think within a month the World Bank came back and said, and I think especially because investors had agreed to that this was a great idea, agreed to go ahead and develop a product which enabled the investors not only to invest, but to invest inside their traditional, normal, mainstream benchmark portfolios, which was, as I see it, the big change to everything that had been before, that they didn't have to have a special view with this kind of investment. The labeling and the process around this and the interaction with investors and the design, which was very, very simple, enabled and allowed institutional investors to engage in a way they have not engaged before.
We had never launched a product with dedicated funding. So this was new for finance, and at the same time we had this climate strategy, so it was like perfect timing.
The financial community and the scientific community tend to operate in two different spheres. And this was, from my understanding, the first connection between these two worlds. And so we had to learn how to communicate with each other using two different languages, financial vocabulary and research-oriented vocabulary, and try to understand what the other party needed. My colleague Knut Alfsen took the chance to write that first second opinion, and it was the first time that we at Cicero had ever done anything like that. I think at that point we had no idea where it was going. So to be involved in the first green bond was a bit of a surprise, of course, and we thought, well, maybe this is a one-off activity. So it's an interesting project. We're connecting with investors for the first time and with banks, and we're learning what they are interested in, and we're learning what we can communicate to them. But I think what we didn't know is how many times we would replicate this and grow and evolve our methodology as the market evolved. When the World Bank issued the first green bond, they set up a model for how green bonds should be done in terms of best practice. And that was a foundation for establishing the green bond principles. And several banks were involved in establishing these voluntary guidelines for the market that later came to recommend independent reviews, as well as set up some guidance on transparency.
Climate risk is now a financial risk. Transparency is important for investors in order for them to better understand the climate risk exposure to their investments. And that's what the second opinion gives them, more transparency on these risks.
Impact reporting has been very, very important since the very beginning of the green bonds, but it's been an iterative process. The World Bank was very fortunate because they already collected and still collect a tremendous amount of data on all of their projects, and as projects are measured through their implementation, the performance against those performance indicators is updated. Now, through that learning process, I believe that the World Bank has definitely shaped impact reporting throughout the financial community. And that impact reporting is a real value-added, a form of accountability that issuers give to their investors and that investors can then give to their clients to show that this is where your money has gone, this is what it's doing, this is the progress we're making.
You had this positive investment in projects that really did something meaningful against climate change. And you had an independent second opinion on the climate criteria also, and impact reporting afterwards. So really you could be quite safe that it was our money that we invested in this bond would do something meaningful in the battle against climate change.
Before that, we all worked in silos, and the environmental officers knew everything about the environment. The financial officers knew everything about finance, but the interaction which allowed the financial officers to give their input to how environment should be done, and the environmental officers, they understood the financial characteristics, probably is the big achievement of this interaction with this product.
What we see has happened in the market is that green bonds have catalyzed a change in investor behaviors. They want to know where their money's going, but not only for labeled bonds that they're buying. So not only for green bonds or for social bonds or sustainable bonds, but they're asking questions about everything they invest in. And I think that's going to be the capital markets of the future.
I believe that the types of lessons that have been learned from the green bonds in terms of transparency and accountability, knowing where your money is going, are lessons that are now being transferred to social bonds and now being transferred to wider thematic bonds. I truly hope that this expands, but I hope that in the world economy, in fact, grows beyond the question of thematic bonds, and that, in fact, all fixed income investments are measured in these ways.
Well, my utopian future from a climate change research perspective is that all financial decisions are taking into account climate risk. Right now, green bonds are less than 1% of the total bond transactions, and we can see a lot of growth there in terms of different types of sectors, different issuer types, and different regions. So I hope in the next few years that the bond market continues to scale up and that we can continue to provide increased transparency and a connection between the climate science and financial decisions.
Okay. So I have a question, and I hope someone actively participates in the answer. Hopefully all of you. Given what I told you about a business case, what do you think about this video as a business case? Is it good? What mark would you give this video? Actually, let me, since you don't like to, you like to chat, but you don't like to talk. Let me ask you a question into the chat. Give a mark. If you were the professor of this course and someone did this video as a business case, what mark would you give this video? Between 0 and 10. Write it on the chat. I want to see. Miriam gives it a 3. Very vague. More? 6. Sophia is 6. Aldo, 5. Well, there's some characteristics of the video which are great. The music is great. The video is great. It looks like a 4K camera, great lens, fantastic, right? So the video, and that's why it's in YouTube. But there's so much information missing here. And this is not even, of course, the opinion of the reporter. The reporter is there not to do a business case because they don't know what to think about this. But there's a lot of information which is missing. Okay, for example, the information which is missing is these bonds were used to finance what? What? Anybody knows the answer to that? Can you ask ChatGPT? You have a computer in front of you. Can you find out quickly in less than 10 seconds what this first green bond was used to finance? It's not in the video. Okay, I suspect it's not in the video because I know the answer. And the answer is, from a video perspective, is very hard to do. You'll have to shoot a lot of things. You have to go to a wind farm in Germany and this and that. And that, of course, the video maker couldn't do it. It would be a very expensive video. It becomes actually almost a Hollywood production, but that's not there, right? Do you know what this funded? Anybody did it? You can ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT knows. I checked. All right. So that's missing. That should be there. Yeah. Only found climate change. But no, it's well. You have to get deeper. You have to force ChatGPT. You have to milk it. Okay. You have to tell ChatGPT, give me more. And then it'll give you these wind farms and this and that. And then, of course, at some point, ChatGPT just doesn't know. Yeah, no, that we don't want. So, Tammy, I know we don't. That answer is not good. This is ChatGPT just giving you anything. Okay. Yeah, if you Aldo, would you can actually go deeper, ask ChatGPT a little bit more, and then you'll get more information. But this is how you start. This is how you start the case of your business case. Okay. For example, the question is, how would you? What was the interest rate at the time? Okay, so you know this expression. This is the expression that you use to discount cash flows, right? This is the discount cash flow formula where I take into account not only interest rates but also credit risk, right? And I assume you know that. I assume you have seen this at some point, that a bond value is discounted with two discount factors. One is the risk-free rate of return, and the other one is with a hazard rate, which is also called the credit spread, what you have to add to the risk-free rate to value the bond. And typically, H is positive, meaning every counterparty is more likely to default than the central bank of that particular country. Therefore, the interest rate should be higher. That's why the hazard rate H is positive. You've seen this in credit risk in different aspects of that. But at the time, in 2007, when this bond was issued, what was the interest rate? Didn't say. Well, I cannot imagine most people looking into that, but you should know that. These are some of the variables that should be in your business case. And by the way, if you want to do the first green bond as a business case, I'm totally fine with that. I'll be very happy with that too. Okay. But when you have a green bond, something else is going on, which is interesting. And that is that for a green bond, the discount formula is different. It's this one, where to the interest rate, to the risk-free interest rate, you add the default rate. You always do that. But then you remove the green spread from it. We'll see a little bit. Today I'm talking about this. This is what I'm talking about. So in the case of that first green bond, I want to know what G is. G is far more important than R, in fact, for the development of that business case. So if you did this business case, you need to find out what G is. I doubt ChatGPT knows. I doubt. However, that first green bond is public information. You can download the bond covenants and you can read through that. Maybe you can even teach ChatGPT to read through that and give you the G. So if you were to do that first green bond as a business case, you will have to tell me these parameters: P, which are the coupon payments; R, which is the interest rate; H, which is the hazard rate. Was there any credit risk attached to that green bond? I would love to know that. That was also not in the video. And then G, give me the green spread. What was the duration of these bonds? They were 10-year bonds, 15-year bonds, 5-year bonds. What were they? They were issued by, actually, no, we know who they were issued by. We know that. But who was the recipient of the funds? Who were the companies? Was that a consortium that would invest? Were actually the actual wind farm owner? The money of the bonds went where? Who would default in this bond? Who is the actual counterparty? What's the capital structure of this bond? That's also not in the video. Most people will not even understand that. The video is in YouTube. People at this point do not understand the language that I'm using when I'm talking to you about this. But in your business case, this is what you do. You understand what I'm saying? I hope you're understanding what I'm saying, because if you don't understand this, you're not going to do a very good business case. In fact, you will miss a great opportunity of learning something very, very useful. I don't want you to walk out of this course knowing what ESG is about and Refinitiv does this and all this stuff. Everybody knows that. But people don't know this. This is what they don't know. So if you, and the only way to learn this is you have to do it yourselves. That's why in this course, I want you to do a business case and do it well. It's the only way to learn. Okay, I get a very strange feeling because if I was in the room, I'll have a better feeling if you're understanding what I'm saying. No, I don't get a very good understanding if you understand what I'm saying. In fact, let me ask you a question. Well, actually, I already have the answer here. Is it possible that G is bigger than H? From the asset pricing theory perspective, you would say no, because then that would lead to arbitrage. The answer is yes. In practice, yes, it's possible that G is bigger than H. So it's possible you can actually get a green bond that trades at a discount to treasuries, which goes against the asset pricing theory. But as you know, the asset pricing theory is just a theory, right? In practice, in the world, you have negative interest rates sometimes, and with green bonds, sometimes you have very negative interest rates, or at least negative spreads to treasuries. This is very interesting, and this is why there's so much money going into finance. It's into green finance because there's arbitrage every day. And some investors are very happy to pay extra for those bonds. It maybe offsets some of their other carbon footprint. Maybe it helps them lower or improve their ESG rating or something like that. We don't know why they do it, but we know that there are investors who do it. And one of the investors is actually very close to us, is the University Pension Plan. Okay, so again, this is something that you would also mention in a business case about about any green bond. And you go and try to find the variables are H and G. And if you find G bigger than H at some point, bingo, you got something really interesting there. Okay, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. I cannot monitor the chat while I'm lecturing. It's just too many screens for me to monitor. All right. This is very interesting. I don't know if you realize. And very few people in Canada can do this, and you are one of them now. That's why I would like you to do a very good business case. Okay, I continue. I hope this is clear. So with a green bonds comes green rating systems. And what would a rating system be? It's going to look like very much like the one by S&P's or Moody's for credit. In fact, as we just saw, there's a very close mathematical relationship between the green rating system and the credit rating system. They all appear in the exponential of the discount curve at the same time. So what would be the properties of such a rating system? So there's basically three high-level objectives. Is to provide additional incentives for the rated companies to contribute to the attainment of climate goals, such as those of the Paris Accord. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that in this bond, there is something which is called the green covenants. Do you know what a covenant is? When you have a bond, the bond has certain conditions that you have to fulfill, right? Like this money is to be spent on this particular project or not on anything else. Okay, so the money has to be segregated from other things. That's a covenant. It's not a green covenant. A green covenant is to, improve for example, your use of water in your in Ghana or something, and can only be used for that. And there's going to be an audit done every year that tracks your use of those funds to make sure that they were actually in line with those green covenants. And these green covenants are sometimes broken. And when they're broken, that gives rise to what's called a green default. You still paid what you had to do, but you broke a covenant, so you did something illegal because the covenants are binding. Okay. So, and this is part of the rating of the bonds. It should help investors make their decision-making process. In particular, investors without the resources to do their own green due diligence. What does that mean? If you're an investor, University Pension Plan, and you like to do green investments because whatever, then you're going to rely on these green rating systems to ensure that you're making the right decisions and that your investments are in line with your investment policies. The green rating system should be there for that. That means that it's going to be done typically by an audit company like KPMG, Pricewaterhouse, Deloitte, Deloitte probably not. KPMG, Pricewaterhouse for sure, they would do that. And then they would attest that these bonds are indeed what they seem to be. No greenwashing, okay? And it should allow the investors to check firms' improvements and verify that the desired climate mitigation effects are achieved. That's what the rating system should do. Okay. What are the properties? The incentives of the firm should be aligned with climate goals. And this is sometimes not easy to attest. Right? As you know, for example, there's a lot of controversies now on whether electric cars are good for climate or not. There's arguments in favor, arguments against. Most of the arguments in favor and against, they satisfy someone else's agenda. They are not scientifically driven. But if you were, say, KPMG and you had to do this, then you have to go and dig very deep into this and come up with a conclusion so that you can help investors make their investment decisions. And they should be able to verify firms' improvements. Okay, so this is a lot of work, and this is a very big business, very big business. Now, this is difficult too. The biggest difficulty is data, as usual. Okay, you're always going to find that in the 21st century, most of the challenges are always related to data. Always related. And if they're not related to data, they will be related to regulation. Okay, one you find perhaps very attractive, data issues. The other you may find very boring, regulation issues. But these are the typical obstructions that you have. Okay, the ability to check something when you have the data is typically not there. Okay, now there's scopes for climate risk that we've talked about, and I'm pretty sure it was part of your risk management course. I don't know if you discussed this already, but I'll just go quickly. There's scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3. Scope 1 refers to direct emissions. These are companies that are directly involved in the emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere, whether you're a transportation company, heating company, manufacturing, you produce cement, you are scope 1, because you have to heat that limestone to 1,000 degrees by burning something, right? Scope 2 are indirect emissions that result from the generation of purchased energy consumed by the reporting entity. So you are not the one that's doing the emissions, you buy the product, which is the result of the emissions. All right? So, and then scope 3, emissions that occur outside of the organization's direct control. So let me ask you a question again in the chat. If I take a plane, is that scope 1, 2, or 3? 1. If I fly Air Canada, certainly Air Canada is scope 1. Am I scope 1 or am I scope 2? I purchased a ticket. Maybe I'm scope 2. Yeah, that's what I mean. For me, yes, for me. No, Air Canada is scope 1, right? 1 for the company, correct. Although I agree with you. That's what I think. I'm not an expert on this. And even if you are, there's no such thing as being an expert. You are the auditor, right? So you get to decide. You get to decide. The University of Toronto would be what? Scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3 when I fly in an airplane? Three? No, 1. Sorry, 2. Sorry, 2. I work for the University of Toronto, right? If the University of Toronto would hire my services, then there would be a scope 3. Okay, that's how it goes. Okay, this is very interesting, but we're not going to get too much into this. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this paper. It's a paper which you can find in the library of the Bank for International Settlements. By the way, this Bank for International Settlements, BIS, has a wonderful library, wonderful library. My advice is that if you ever encounter into any topic which is of interest for your job interview, anything, business case, go there. They have papers on many things. And this paper is Achievements and Challenges in ESG Markets. And I talked about ESG last week, I know, but this is very specific to green bonds. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this, okay? Actually, this paper starts talking about Asia-Pacific green bonds, and it's a market that is growing very fast. Something that people don't know, but green finance is actually blooming in Asia, perhaps more than in other parts of the world. I have my own theories as to why. I don't know if this is, what you think, but part of the reason is that Asia, China in particular, it just needs so much energy that they need to be very careful how they're going to be generating that, because they need their energy to be sustainable, they need to be there forever. right? They cannot allow for, run out of coal in the middle of a big expansion. So they have to be very smart, smarter than anybody, because they have to grow faster than anybody. And I think that's the reason that we see such a big growth of green bonds in the Asia Pacific regions. So subsidize green bonds and loans to support decarbonization, and require financial institutions to conduct climate stress tests and disclose climate risks. So this is something which is very unknown. And I know many of you are from China. I don't even know if you knew this, but this is a very big and a very discerning factor. If any one of you is thinking of going back to China to work at some point in the next few months, then this is very important. In fact, I was just there, as you know, precisely on this. My trip to China was precisely related to this. So this is real. Okay, this is real. All right. In fact, the Asia Pacific region accounts for 20% of the outstanding labeled bonds. This is a lot, because when you look at the rest of the bonds, they're not as big. And here are two names of two banks that have been issuing green bonds to finance more green projects. I don't know this bank, the Asian Development Bank or the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Maybe you know, but these are banks who've been doing this. So if any one of you wants to get into the green bond business and you want to work in Asia, that's it. Let me know. We'll find you a job there. Okay, no problem. It should be easy. All right. So here are some figures about what's happening there in billions of dollars. Look at the green. Green stands for the environment, the E of the ESG. S is the red, stands for social, and G and sustainability is the rest. Green stands for the environment. You can see that green is the fastest growing. It's the biggest and the fastest growing. So, and a lot of reason for that is the official support. This is coming right from the government, as most things in Asia. Finance in North America comes from financial players like JP Morgan has a lot to say, sometimes more than the government. But when you go to Asia, it's typically the government that has things to say, and this is their position. So this is real. When it comes to securitization, this is the securitization of existing securities, not the bonds. Then we can see that in the mortgage-backed securities, the proportion is, of course, small, but still big in comparison with the rest. And when you look at social bonds, these are not related to the environment, but related to social issues. And again, this is all about the Asia Pacific region. We can see the speed of growth of social bonds. Okay. And I have here the division between public and private is more or less 50-50. So this is very solid, very widespread growth in the Asia Pacific for these types of bonds. All right. Now, one interesting thing about ESG, E in particular, today we're focused on E because we're talking about green bonds, is the correlation that exists between extreme weather events and the interest in green bonds. You probably have read in the news these days about the floods and the destruction in Spain. It's the country I was born. I follow that country very, very well. So when things like that happen, then people turn into green bonds. That's what they do. Okay, you have a graph here that as we start to see more extreme weather events, and as the mentality of people starts to be more aware of that there may be a climate emergency, and that then they watch these images on the news, then people make the connection. And again, I'm not saying that they say necessarily a direct reason, but if there is a connection, then people move their money. That's what people do. People vote with their wallet. And this is what creates funds to flow. This is what creates funds to flow. right or wrong. And again, this is the reason that this course exists, because this course is about your career, and your career is you're going to get a job where there is money. If there is no money somewhere, then forget it. There's no career there. There's no job there. Okay. If the option trading, traditional option trading stops tomorrow, then MMF will not be teaching option trading. Why would we? Your jobs are not there. So that's why this is where money is going. So we have to talk about this. And this is the relationships of extreme weather events in the last 60 or 70 years. You can see that they're increasing, and this is creating the awareness for people to do that. And the awareness leads to money being raised for things like this. So to raise money for green bonds when there's no awareness of this is going to be very difficult. But when there is a lot of awareness about climate and green bonds, they raise money. And yes, they are so popular that they can give rise to arbitrage opportunities, because then they can become cheaper than treasuries. And if that's the case, then you can imagine financial companies need to be there. Financial companies need to go where there is arbitrage. They have to be there, right? So that's the unequivocal reason why this should be of importance to you. There could be ethical reasons why you want to be concerned about this, but there's certainly professional reasons for you to be involved in this, because this is where the money is going. And most of you, except I think it's 3 people who are not from MMF, most of you are here to work in the financial sector. And what I'm trying to tell you is that the financial sector is driven by money, and this is where the money is going. And this is the reason why. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the carbon risk premium, which is, well, you will see. It's. I have to say a number of things about this. So this, again, I'm talking about this paper that I told you. Okay, so this paper examines whether there's an increased cost of debt based on the carbon footprint. So you would think, from everything I've said to you today, that when there's carbon capture or carbon reduction, then there's going to be a carbon risk premium, negative one. And in fact, if there is a carbon risk premium, a negative one, then there should be some carbon capture going on. The answer is no. That's not exactly how it works. Okay, that's not how it works. So I'll review some of this so we understand. At least this is a little bit counterintuitive. So question, do investors require a higher yield for bonds issued by companies with higher carbon emissions? The answer is no. No, not necessarily, no. This is all done on a peer system. So you can have a company that is very green already, but all their peers are green. So the view is that they don't have any particular advantage their peers when it comes to lowering emissions, so they don't get a premium. But you can have a company that is what you would consider to be very emitting, but if they do better than their peers, then there will be a magnet for green bonds, and then they would get the green yield, so to speak. Okay, so this is consistent with what I mentioned last week, that the ESG ratings are done on a peer-by-peer basis. So it's a function of which industry you're in. If you're in a very clean industry, it's going to be very difficult for you, although you're already clean, to get a green premium. But if you're in a dirty industry, it's easier for you to get a green premium. You just need to be better than the rest. Okay? All right. So to measure this, someone did a linear regression on the corporate bond spreads and the carbon emissions, the actual emissions, while controlling for bond level variables term. So they try to, from the bond data, they try to extract everything that was not green driven, and then do the linear regression of that. By the way, the results I'm about to tell you, I'm telling you what is written on the paper. I have reason to suspect that the conclusions are not correct, okay? But I don't have proof of anything, so I'm just telling you something which is out there in the literature, and this is what people talk about. This is the status quo. I'm giving you the status quo. I'm not giving you my own opinion, okay? Sure, opinion. I would never give you my opinion. I've never give you my facts because I don't have them. But I suspect that what's on this paper is not exactly correct. They run regressions on scope 2, sorry, on scope 1, direct emissions, and scope 2. No, nothing in scope 3. Scope 3 is too esoteric to run regressions on. So that's what they did. They run regressions on scope 1 and scope 2. And what they found is something like this. They come up with a term called socium. Socium is what they call the green spread or the green yield. I prefer to call it green yield. Socium, I even have difficulty pronouncing that word. What they found is that investors are willing to pay a premium at issuance for social rather than conventional bonds denominated in US dollar or euro. Okay, a socium which corresponds on average to more than one notch credit rating upgrade. So from say double B to B, that would be the level that we're talking about. And this is particularly important in Europe, which is the continent where we have the most advanced taxonomies for sustainable development. I will say a few things about taxonomies today. I should also tell you the lecture notes that I have for today are fairly extensive. I will only cover a piece of them. I cannot talk for 2 hours because I have something urgent that I need to deal with in about 20 minutes. I have to finish my class in about 20 minutes. But I'll upload all the notes for you so you can read them on your own. I will try to make sure that I address the important points that I can help you with, and the rest you can just read on your own. All right, so I'm going to now talk about the socium. All right, so this is what he's looking for. Are investors willing to pay for something? So the socium is defined to be the spread between a conventional bond yield and a social bond yield. So, or if you want to go to my equation in the beginning, we had R plus H minus G, this is similar to that, except this is not focused on the green aspect of that, it's focused on the social aspect of that. So not the E, but the S in the ESG. That's what this paper is looking for, and that's how they define it. So to measure the statistical significance of the socium, like I said, they have to clean the data, they have to organize the data in a certain way. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not have to, and I don't want to give you all the details of that because we're not interested in the details for this. We're interested in the conclusions. If any one of you wants to do a business case on this, go right ahead. So this is the linear regression that they did. In the linear regression, the variable that they found to be relevant are the option adjusted spread for the bond. This is going to be the dependent variable, okay, by a certain company at a certain month. Then is the probability of default, the 5-year probability of default for that particular company at a particular month. So it's a credit spread of a particular type. This is this is an independent variable in the linear regression. Then we have the carbon emissions of the actual company. 1 year lagged carbon emissions, scope 1 and scope 2. They do two types of regression, okay? And then some control variables for the bond that I'm not going to get into. So this is the regression that they did. And then they have some white noise in the end. The result that came out of this, what they observed, is this. This is for euro and US dollar, and then the rest is for Japanese yen and the Korean won. And let me address the euro and the USD. There you can see a socium which is considerable. If you look at the full sample, it's not as much, and it's all due to Japan and Korea. So what this seems to imply, again, read the paper for the full statements. I'm just giving you a snapshot of the paper. If this is of interest to you, read the full paper. But what this seem to say is that this socium that we're talking about, this willingness of investors to pay for social good, is to a certain extent stronger in Europe and the US. I have not done the data myself. I don't know this. I suspect this is bigger in Europe than in the United States. I would be very interested in seeing a split of this particular graph. I don't have it. It's not my number, but that's what I suspect. That's my suspicion. It's not a fact. I don't know. But here you can see that the difference is quite pronounced between these two continents. This is between the years 2016 and 2021. If you update these numbers, they will look very different also. I don't know that either. I'm just telling you what's the, and the 21 basis points seems to be the average socium spread that they see in US dollar and euro. And 21 basis points is about like one credit rating notch. Okay, 21 basis points. That's what they observe. That's something. But although the statistics is very significant, the sample is very small. And again, another reason that it would be good if we had this updated to today's data, but I haven't done it. I don't have the data. I don't know. Okay, I'm just giving you information which is on that paper, which I consider to be important. Another, and this is a bit more surprising. What he found is that so first fact is that bonds issued by companies with higher carbon emissions, browner firms, if you will, measured from the scope 1 emissions perspective, have a higher risk-adjusted financing cost. So brown is expensive. That's what this is implying. However, this result is not consistent across all firms. So what they see is that a 10% increase in carbon emissions for most companies will signify only 2 basis points for the full sample, but negligible for non-energy intensive firms, and 6 basis points for energy intensive firms. So there is some variability, as you would expect, between the emissions of the companies and the spread, the green spread that these companies will be entitled to. And this gives rise to the concept of taxonomies. Investors are definitely interested in this, and they're willing to pay for it. Once investors are willing to pay for it, going back to the discussion at the beginning of the lecture, is we have to, the financial system needs to provide investors with a reference framework so they can make their decisions. And this is what's called taxonomies. Taxonomies is about making classifications of situations so you can take actions based on the classification. And all of this is for the benefit of the investors. Remember last week I told you that only one entity was giving advice to companies how they should report financially relevant ESG data. The accounting standard, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, SASB, okay, was the only one. But then servicing investors, there were 20, I don't know, 15 other services selling the investors. The investors, like they have more money, they are a better client, and that's where they are better serviced. This goes back to that, creating taxonomies to serve the investor making their decisions. And they should be standardized and somehow consistent with each other. Now, China and the European Union have developed their own sustainable finance taxonomies. Canada and the UK are making steps towards it, and the United States, they just want to lend money to the others, but they are not very advanced in this. And this is because investors want to make informed decisions about the ESG ratings. Okay. All right. Environmental issues are easier to measure. Social benefits are more difficult to measure. And that introduces some differences between the ES and the G ratings. So I think I'm going to run through this. You can read this. Let me just run through this. You can read this yourself. There's a lot of words in this thing that I wrote here. Just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go through this. Yeah, let me go. I have a video here. It's the power of disclosure. It talks about what we're talking about. The video is better than my words. So let me just put the video for you. And
climate change is clearly one of the biggest challenges facing our time.
We see local producers who cannot produce raw materials anymore. We see in our value chain the consequences of climate change.
There is increasing concern. There's a kind of escalating concern. And I think there's a sense from investors that this is real and not going away, and of increasing importance in terms of how to invest.
We started our transformation to green energy a decade ago, and we could really see that our business foundation was disappearing. Today, we are the greenest energy company in Europe, and we have clearly learned a lot from reporting into the CDP and our sustainability work.
I think that disclosure on our environmental performance is extremely important. And one of the first tools that helped us doing so was CDP.
The investor research that CDP carry out is really detailed, high-quality investment research. That enables us to be able to differentiate the performance of companies and pick those that look like they will have the best prospects for long-term investment.
Being part of a reporting framework means that you disclose under certain standards. And we believe that you want to disclose in order for your stakeholders to be able to double-check if what you're saying is actually true.
We are particularly proud when we receive the CDP ratings, and that is of course of extremely important added value. I think what is very important as a company is that you do not just respond to disclosure. I think it's important that you do not just want to satisfy also extra financial rating agencies. The important thing is that it's really at the heart of your business.
Companies themselves understand that they will have to take increasingly dramatic choices to remain sustainable in order to have the confidence of their investors and wider society and have a license to operate. And we prefer sources of metrics which are pure in their form so that we can understand the underlying data. And CDP is the best go-to source for that information.
So disclosure is something very important because this is how all of these objectives are going to be achieved. I have here 4 key defining characteristics of taxonomies. Again, this is from the paper. I'm not going to spend time on this. You can read this yourself. Allow me to just move. I'm not going to spend my time defining what taxonomies are. Okay. I think just go through this. This is another statement about this. We just heard a video about disclosure. This is the growth of climate-related financial disclosures. So my guess is that most of you in your job are going to be confronted with this one way or another. Some of you will be investors. Some of you will be recipients of green funds, perhaps, and others will be consultants. I would say 12 of you, that's my guess, 12 of you will be involved with this in the next year or two. Over time, many of you will be involved with more of these things, but it's very hard for me to predict how you will be involved. But at least let me give you with these thoughts. And as you can see, green is leading the other ESG factors right now. Okay. A lot of the sources of the money that create these flows are by our equities. I have a paper on this, by the way, if you're interested. I wrote a paper there with Allianz Global Investors, a $600 billion asset management firm. They're slightly bigger than Canada Pension Plan. Because they have a very big division for ESG. So we wrote a paper which is a better version of this graph that I have here, but this is the graph that comes from the paper that I mentioned to you. Although this is something that I know a little bit about. I spent some time looking into this. Okay. Now we can see how Browner firms first marginally higher risk adjusted the financing costs. The numbers are here. They're not staggering. They're not big, but they are there. They are there. The metric we use for this is if there's a 10% increase of carbon emissions, what would the cost of the debt be? And then you see how it comes down. It's right there, right? And then they break it down into scope 1 and scope 2. Again, scope 1 is the direct emissions. Scope 2 are the indirect emissions, one step removed. Okay. And the confidence interval is significant. Okay. Another aspect of this is that brown firms are perceived to be riskier. And there's some evidence of that with its own set of linear regressions here. I'm just going to ignore that. If you're interested in this, you can read the paper. Let me move away from that. And now I want to close my lecture today talking about the relationship between green bonds and carbon emissions. The key components of green bond issuance are the use of the proceeds have to go into environmentally sustainable activities, and this is checked and verified by auditors. A process for determining project eligibility. I know some people who they're in this department, that's what they do, and it's a lot of work to go through all of the documentation that you have to give to the investors so they can check and indeed verify that the funds they will give you are going into green projects, sustainable activities, and then setting up the management of the funds so that the funds can be tracked and verified that they actually went where they were supposed to do. You have annual reporting on the use of the proceeds, and in the European Union, there's a green bond standard. I suspect in Asia we'll see that if it isn't already there, it's coming soon. North America will take a little bit longer. So, and okay, so it's there to incentivize a green project, and that's where we see this growth of funds more in Europe and Asia Pacific than in North America. Some graphs that tell us about the evolution of the firms that disclose carbon emissions in terms of thousands of firms and in terms of percentages of firms. And in all cases, they're going up. So this is going to catch up with your job, whatever your job is, over time. And this is the distribution of carbon intensities, green bond issuers compared to other firms. So, and here's scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So what we see here is that the companies that have bigger emissions, the emissions, the tons per US dollar million of range. So for every million of dollars of revenue, you divide the emissions by the $1 million of revenue that they have. Okay, and this, so you can see how the size of those markets decreases with the size of the firm. The more revenue the firm has, the less green bonds there is. So the conclusion of this is that green bonds do not necessarily emanate from more carbon efficient firms. So because of that, it is very important to understand that there's no such thing as green firms, but green bonds. In other words, a green bond is there to enhance the emissions of a particular firm, and the flow of funds that come from the bond have to go into the decrease of those emissions, but that does not mean that the company that receives the green bonds is necessarily green. Okay, this is similar to the way you do credit risk. When you have credit risk, you know that a bond issue has its own credit rating, and it's focused on the ability of the firm to return the money to the investors on that particular issue. A different issue, a different bond issue may have its different capital structure and therefore different rating system. This is something similar. So the important thing to learn from this is that what's green is the bond, not the firm. Okay, and this also is important to know because in practice you can have very counterintuitive intuitive situations where firms which are brown, they seem to have an easy time raising green funds or issuing green bonds. There's no contradiction there. Okay. In fact, brown firms, maybe they want to have an easier time issuing green bonds if they have the ability to make some of their activity be more sustainable. Okay. So anyway, that's what this talks about. Just run quickly through this. I'm in a bit of a rush to finish this. I have to join another meeting about some unforeseen event. So let me just, I think I want to end with this. I want to end with this. What I have here is a different type of rating system. This is not a green bond rating system like we saw earlier, or an ESG rating system like we saw last week. This is a carbon intensity rating system. And then what you'd rate here is a company carbon intensity. And if they say there's a certain rating system, this is not very widely used, okay, but it is there. And here you rate the company's carbon consumption. And there's some, let me just go through the, okay, and this is a transition matrix. This is a transition matrix that tells you if you're in one company with a particular carbon intensity rating, 5 Gs or 5 Ps, then the probability that you stay in that rating or you move to a different rating, that is given by a Markov chain. It's a Markov process, very similar to the one that you have in credit markets. And the probability, the transition probability is here. This opens the door to the creation of carbon emission dynamics. Companies who are of a particular carbon footprint, you know how their carbon footprint will evolve over time because it's a Markov chain. And you can, by taking powers of the matrix, you can find the probabilities that this company is going to become greener, browner over time, and at what period of time you can do that. You know how to do that. This is Markov chain theory. And I'm going to end it here. The last thing that I have is a video. It's a good video about a person who, a financial professional who discovered what I'm telling you. And she decided to quit her job and start her own company doing something. It's a good story of someone's life being transformed into this, finding an opportunity, a business opportunity, also a personal development opportunity to take these things, do something with her life, and also make what I suspect was a decent amount of money by doing that. It's a good video. It's a very good video. It's 6:36. What I would suggest is this video is on my YouTube channel, so you don't need me to watch the video. You can watch the video on your own. That's how I wanted to end my class today. So I recommend that you do it. Okay, find the video. It's on my YouTube channel. Maybe I play the first second that you can.
I was living in Hong Kong. It was a warm night. The time was 1 a.m.
I leave it there, okay? She's living in Hong Kong, and at 1 a.m., something happened. You want to know the rest? Watch the video. It's a very good story. Someone could actually do a business case on this woman. That would be very interesting to do. But there's no need. You can watch the video, 17 minutes on YouTube. I will end my class here now. So I say goodbye now. I will see you, all of you, in person next Friday. And remember, there will be an event at MMF right after class, and you'll meet some interesting people there.